I would like to now talk about the pandemic and getting back to normal. A return to normal, or bringing back decency, is the number one reason most normie Democrats cite when they say they just want Trump gone. It's like America has strayed so far from what it once was, and everything Trump says and does is such an affront to decency, it's just too much. They want it all to stop. They want America to go back to the good old days, which I guess was like 2012 or something. We just didn't have all the problems we have now. We didn't have a public health crisis. We didn't have tens of millions of people without health insurance. We didn't have people getting kicked out of their homes. We didn't have police brutality and protests against it. We didn't have migrant kids in cages. We didn't have climate change. We didn't have a president assassinating people in the Middle East. We didn't have corruption in the executive branch. We didn't have white supremacists in the White House. That just didn't happen when Democrats were in charge. Sure, our country wasn't perfect, but when we had problems, we addressed them with kindness and civility. That's what we need to get back to. And that's why we should all vote for Joe Biden. Because the senile rapist is going to make America decent again. The Biden campaign should put that on a t-shirt. If you think that anything I just said was true, congratulations, you're a Democrat. Feel free to join the rest of us in reality anytime. The whole decency thing is just another version of the argument that Joe Biden is somehow the solution to the problems he helped create. If he just becomes president, the daily outrage goes away for Democrats. It will have only just begun for Republicans. But most normie Democrats will experience the weight being lifted off their shoulders and think that something changed. They'll think that Biden did something different from Trump. But we all know on the left that nothing major on the policy front will actually happen, because Biden keeps telling us that. Also because the differences between Democrats and Republicans on policy are not as vast as they would have us believe. But a lot of Democratic voters would be satisfied with the Biden presidency and nothing fundamentally changing, because they're doing fine and they just don't like Trump. Their outrage about his policies is a performance. It's not real. He just makes them uncomfortable. He's too transparent in his corruption, his misogyny, his white supremacy. Democrats don't like that. They prefer that it all be done behind a veil of decency. For example, Democrats like to do wars in the Middle East, put children from Latin America in cages, and do mass incarceration of black people just as much as Republicans. But when Democrats do it, of course it's not about white supremacy. It's just about national security, and having strong borders, and being tough on crime. That's what Joe Biden will deliver. The clean and articulate version of what Trump was already doing. But Democrats will perceive a difference, because their outrage will be gone. And they'll be like, see, Trump was the problem all along. We just had to get rid of him, and then all our problems went away. But those problems will not go away if we swap Trump with Biden. Biden already told us he's not doing anything. He likes everything just the way it is. He set this all up. And he's being paid by billionaires and corporations to keep everything the same. And those problems will continue to fester. And we will waste 4 or 8 years on Biden and then end up with another Trump. Democrats will be baffled why the left is still unhappy. They'll have no idea why working class voters keep drifting to the right. It will remain a mystery to the Democrats why people of color and young people are unenthusiastic about voting for Democrats. If you're on the left, or if you belong to any marginalized group, and we have a lot of them in this country, a return to normal will look the same, and that's not what we want. If you're a Democrat, or you're on the left, you probably think that Donald Trump has handled the pandemic badly. So badly that you don't want him to be president anymore. You're ready for November to get here so you can vote him out of office. If you're telling the truth, and I think you're not, if you truly believe that the way Trump is handling the crisis is unacceptable and he poses a threat to the well-being of the 300 plus million people in this country, great. Then the proper position to take on this issue is to call for him to be removed from office or resign now. Not in January, now. If you think this can wait until January, or maybe 4 years from January, if Trump gets reelected, then your outrage is fake. Maybe your response to me is that it's not realistic to say that Trump should be removed from office now. The Republicans won't allow it. The best we can do is just vote him out when we get the chance. That's a tough argument, though, given how outrageous everything is right now. January 2021 is 6 months from now. We're already 6 months into this crisis, and look how much damage Trump has done. It's probably going to get worse over the next 6 months. Remember, when the virus hit our shores in January this year, it took time for it to spread all over the country. That process is complete now. It's everywhere. If you think that what has transpired over the last 6 months is unacceptable or disqualifying, then you can't say that Trump should be allowed to remain on the job for another 6 months and get another 180,000 Americans killed. That makes no sense. For the life of me, I can't figure out why the suburban people, who are always so outraged about Trump, are not out in the streets right now demonstrating, demanding that Trump be removed from office. I'm sure MSNBC would give it wall-to-wall coverage. But maybe it's too dangerous for boomers and suburbanites to protest. There's a deadly virus going around. Okay, then why aren't these people flooding their senators and representatives' offices with phone calls, saying Congress needs to remove Trump from office immediately? Find a way. You probably can't remove him for being incompetent or being a sociopath. That's 25th Amendment stuff. But you absolutely can remove him for all the felonies he's committed since 2016. But I don't think those calls are being made. Everyone seems content to sit around until November, and then January. It's as though their outrage about the pandemic is just another performance of outrage. There's no urgency, there's no desperation. You can wait. The outrage is just a reflex, a daily ritual we all perform. Whenever there's a problem now, it's just automatically Trump's fault. There can't be any other factors in play. Certainly nothing systemic going on in this country that would have led us to our current predicament. And for anyone out there who thinks I'm too quick to defend Trump, like I'm a secret Trump supporter or something, my position on the Trump presidency has never changed. I thought he should have been removed from office on Inauguration Day, 2017, and every day since. He was never qualified. He was never mentally fit to serve. It's always been a mystery to me why everyone has been so accepting of the very fact of his presidency. It doesn't have to be that way. We have two mechanisms in our Constitution that allow for a president to be removed from office, but they've never been used. And we've had a lot of presidents who have abused their power, committed crimes, or were mentally unfit to serve. But we all just accept that. Republicans, Democrats, the left, all of us. It's like when you become president, you get a 4-year or 8-year window to do whatever you want. You get to commit crimes, send people to their deaths, wreck the country, and no one cares. It's not right, and it doesn't have to be that way. In most professions, if you fuck up, you get fired on the spot. And now back to the pandemic. I don't doubt that if Joe Biden were president right now, he would have told everyone a long time ago to wear a mask and practice social distancing and get tested if you can afford it. Any Democrat would have done the same. And I think most Republicans who might have been president would have done the same as well. The sociopathic decisions that Trump made in January and February not to order tests and protective equipment when he had the chance because he wanted to keep the numbers down and make it easier to get reelected, I do think that is uniquely Trumpian, and it was avoidable if the Democrats had bothered to nominate someone 4 years ago that voters actually wanted to vote for. But I also believe that if Joe Biden had been president this spring, the federal government's response to the pandemic and collapse of the economy would have been no different. Despite President Biden telling everyone to wear a mask, there still would have been 30 million Americans with no health insurance and many millions more underinsured. If any of them had been exposed to the virus or were showing symptoms, they would have been reluctant to see a doctor or get tested for fear of receiving a fat bill they couldn't pay. If you don't have insurance, what doctor can you even go see? I guess it's the emergency room or nothing, but that's expensive. About 80% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. If any of them were exposed to the virus or showed symptoms, they would have had to show up for work anyway because they needed the money. Under President Biden, we would very much still have mass incarceration and widespread homelessness as well. I'm not an epidemiologist, but it seems like under these conditions, the virus would have spread rapidly and uncontrollably anyway. The virus spread all over those fancy European countries and East Asian countries where they actually have social safety nets. Why would it have mattered if the President of the United States had a D or an R next to his name? The Democrats and the Republicans have left this country totally defenseless in a public health crisis. And you think Joe Biden is the answer? If you do not have health insurance, he cannot help you. If you are underinsured, he cannot help you. If you are now uninsured because you have lost your job, he's got nothing to offer you. All he can do is reopen the Obamacare exchanges so that people can buy affordable insurance with money they don't have because they've lost their jobs or they don't have savings because they're living paycheck to paycheck. If you do receive medical care and you get a bill you can't pay, Joe Biden isn't going to help you with that. In fact, if you already had medical debt, as millions of Americans do, Biden can't help you with that either. The number varies wildly on the internet. 46 million, 79 million, 137 million, but those are all big numbers. And that's not the amount of debt, that's the number of people who have medical debt. Healthcare in this country is a for-profit enterprise. Medical bills are staggering. Joe Biden wants it that way. His corporate donors are paying him to keep it that way, not to give regular folks a break. And we all know how he feels about bankruptcy. It's a privilege that people abuse. When he was a senator, he made sure it would be harder for people to get out from under crushing debt. Forget about Mitch McConnell. Joe Biden is the real Grim Reaper when it comes to Medicare for All. He's positioning himself as the last line of defense against the destruction of for-profit healthcare and big pharma. Donald Trump would be more likely to sign that bill into law, not because he cares about anyone's well-being, but because he might perceive it to be of some benefit to him politically. Joe Biden doesn't care. And why should he? Being opposed to Medicare for All doesn't hurt him politically if we all vote for him anyway. So let's not. As for the economy, again, Biden's response would be no different from Trump's. When there is an economic crisis in this country, the Democratic and Republican response is to rapidly pull vast sums of money out of thin air and hand it over to corporations and Wall Street. No questions asked, no strings attached, no oversight. The corporations get bailed out, and everyone else can go fuck themselves. It happened in 2008 and 2009, and it happened again this year. And it doesn't matter if the president is a Democrat or a Republican. It doesn't matter which party controls the House and the Senate. It doesn't matter if there are progressives or libertarians in Congress. It doesn't matter if we know history is repeating itself. The federal government's response is the same. Congress bails out corporations with the blessing of the White House at taxpayers' expense, and actual human beings are on their own. In 2008, Senator Biden voted to bail out the banks and the auto industry. When he was vice president, corporations were turning record profits again, and over 5 million Americans lost their homes and the wealth that is tied to home ownership. And of course, because this is America, African American and Latino households were hit much harder than white ones. But Vice President Biden wasn't able to help any of them because he was busy handing out money to corporations. The same thing is happening right now, in real time. Biden couldn't have drawn it up better himself. The money's going exactly where he wants it to go, while he gets to hide in his basement. Of course, it doesn't matter what Biden would have done if he were president right now. He's not. The crazy orange guy is. That's the sad legacy of the Biden-Obama administration. We got stuck with Trump. But another harsh reality of what this country has become is that whoever gets sworn in as president next January is stepping into a crisis. There's no going back to normal. Biden can't just tell everyone to wear a mask starting January 20th and make the virus magically go away. He also doesn't have the policies of the left at his disposal. He's a corporatist. He cannot do anything to solve the public health crisis because he doesn't believe that it's the government's responsibility to provide everyone with health care. He's also being bribed by the health insurance and pharmaceutical industries to withhold medical care from Americans if he becomes president. He's got nothing to offer the economy except corporate bailouts and dumping money into Wall Street. And speaking of nothing, let's not give the Democrats in Congress a pass for how they've handled the pandemic. Joe Biden doesn't have any power right now. He doesn't hold office. But Democratic lawmakers are supposed to be doing something. So how have they spent their time since March? Let's see. They've bailed out corporations, created a $4 trillion slush fund for Steve Mnuchin. They did some virtue signaling about how racism is bad. They've gone on vacation a few times. And Nancy Pelosi ate some ice cream. Ice cream, as Jimmy Dore said, flavored with the tears of the poor. Word on the street is that the Democrats' strategy for the pandemic is to just kind of sit back and do nothing, and let Trump look bad. Democratic voters should not be okay with that. We all want Trump gone, or so we say, but the Democrats are playing with people's lives. Interestingly, Trump's strategy for the pandemic is also to do nothing. He's doing nothing because he's a sociopath. He's not capable of caring about other human beings. He thinks that if he pretends that the virus isn't here, it will cease to exist. He endangered the lives of every single person in this country, intentionally. It was a dereliction of duty. You'd think it would be criminal, and certainly grounds for removal from office. But the Democrats also did nothing on purpose. They were willing to risk the lives of every single person in this country as well. Tens of millions lost their jobs, lost their health insurance. We don't even know yet how many will lose their homes. People are having to choose between food and rent, between medication and rent. The virus is tearing through prisons and nursing homes and meat processing plants and farms. Businesses are closed. Children can't go to school. Tens of thousands of people are hospitalized. Over 180,000 dead. And the Democrats are doing nothing. On purpose. All of that happened on their watch. They let it happen on purpose. It was a tactical decision on their part. They are just as much to blame as Trump. Perhaps more so because they're supposed to be the responsible ones. They've got blood on their hands, and we're letting them off the hook. I actually think there's something more sinister going on. The strategy of doing nothing isn't just about making Trump look bad. It's also ideological. And we often forget that on the left as we fall into the trap of thinking that the Republicans are the cruel, heartless ones and Democrats are the humane ones. We forget when we hear the sirens call of MSNBC and party leadership and the Young Turks and the Majority Report. The Democrats are just socially liberal Republicans. They do not believe that the role of the federal government is to make people's lives better. Its role is to make corporations richer and start wars. And that mindset trickles down to state and local governments as well. Back in March and April, when the federal government was doing nothing except dumping money into Wall Street and going on vacation for the entire month of April, the burden was on the states to lock everything down and source their own tests, PPE, and ventilators. Most Democratic governors, some Republican governors, county officials, and city officials were actually doing the right thing. The virus was already out of control, it had spread through the entire country, and the only thing left to do was shut it all down. And for a couple of months, in states with responsible governments, it worked. But the problem is, if the government is going to tell people you have to stay home, you can't go to work, your kids can't go to school, you may get laid off and lose your health insurance, that can only be sustained for so long before the government has to start taking care of people. Basically, everyone would have to be paid to stay home. And Democrats don't want to do that any more than Republicans. In May, after a couple of months of acting responsibly, Democratic officials at the state, county, and municipal levels finally got their excuse to open everything up again. It was the inevitable backlash from the far right against the tyranny of shelter-in-place orders and wearing masks. And then Democratic officials, including ones right here in California, started saying, well, that's it. We've defeated the coronavirus. Mission accomplished. We're open for business. And then the number of cases skyrocketed. But there's still no talk about the government taking care of people, because Democratic politicians don't want that. Let's also save some blame for Andrew Cuomo, who never acted responsibly. He forged his own path through the crisis. He seems to have the same severe psychological problems that Trump has, which leave him incapable of caring about other human beings. Cuomo's life's work has been to reduce the number of hospital beds in New York, reduce how much the state spends on Medicaid, and make nursing homes more profitable. All of those chickens came home to roost. They had to build a hospital in Central Park, in a state that used to have 20,000 more hospital beds before Andrew Cuomo got rid of them. It's funny how a few months ago, people were saying that he should replace Biden as the Democratic nominee, because Joe's not really with it anymore. Cuomo is just as conservative, just as corporate friendly, and probably more corrupt, but his mind is still working. Exactly the kind of guy the Democrats like. Why aren't the people of New York State calling for his resignation? And why aren't we in California calling for Gavin Newsom to step down? He fucked up. He opened the state when it was obviously too soon. He's been way too nice to PG&E, like suspiciously nice. That has nothing to do with the pandemic, but it's another fuck up. I just learned there actually is an effort underway to recall Governor Newsom. It's being led by Republicans, not the left, because the left doesn't do anything. The Republicans are doing it mainly for Republican reasons, like taxes and sanctuary cities and the death penalty, but also because of the pandemic. It would take 1.5 million signatures to trigger a recall election. The deadline is in November. We know there are at least 2 million Bernie supporters / left-wingers in California, plus the millions of Republicans that are apparently here somewhere. Of course, I would be willing to overlook Gavin Newsom's failures on the job if he were to, I don't know, maybe tell all 40 million of us in California not to vote for Joe Biden. But I'm a nice person. If this recall thing catches on, there may come a point where it's too late to stop it. I'm old enough to remember back in 2003 when Gray Davis was removed from office because of an energy crisis that wasn't even real. Gavin Newsom's fuck-ups are very real. So why are we putting up with this? I guess we reserve our outrage for Trump. But the Democrats failed us too. And like Trump, they did it on purpose. They caused over 180,000 Americans to die. They did that. Democrats at all levels of government. And we are being told that we have to re-elect them because they're the good guys. They're not.